is Wellesley Science and Technology. We're here today with Dr. Dean Blase, who is Wellesley Public Schools' new Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you.
We're so happy to have you here helping us promote STEM.
It's great to be here.
So, Dean has taught secondary school in English in Cincinnati, Ohio, and written a book titled Trust Me, I Can Read in 2012, in which she and her co-author introduced new approaches for teachers looking to transform their high school English students into passionate readers. In the book, she also discusses how she's built upon her strengths in the high school English classroom and how it can be found, and now it can be found on Harvard's EdCast, which is a weekly series of podcasts available at Harvard University's iTunes U page that also features a 15 to 20 minute conversation with thought leaders in the field of education from across the country and around the world. Dean has also co-authored a second book, a children's book this time, called There's an Octopus Under My Bed, which is about the theory of evolution and the Galapagos Islands. These days, here in Wellesley, she is pursuing a curriculum review, supporting Wellesley's first pilot project for science and technology for the expo that's coming April 5th at the high school, and many other things that are on her to-do list. And Dean will also participate in the upcoming panel discussion about Tony Wagner's book, Creating Innovators, to be held in the library on March 19th, 7:30 p.m., as a lead-up to the town-wide expo. So we're very excited. So just to get started, so tell us a little bit about you. I know that you have a very interesting career that didn't always stay in one path. So I want to know, so where did you grow up?
That's right. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, so college town girl, and loved the just the excitement and learning environment that was there. My father was a professor, my mom was an artist, so we were out in the community all the time, and I have really fond memories of just doing as much as the community would offer to us. I was one of those people who knew when I was a kid that I wanted to be a teacher. I made my friends play school with me, and I was always the teacher, and we had the desk set up and everything. So education was sort of a foregone conclusion for me.
Did you have the red marker pen?
No, I did not. I just remember like really enjoying the big desk and having all the stuff that went on the big desk. So I pursued education from the beginning, and what that meant is at a very early age, I was in my own classroom, just really loving it. I had 20 years of teaching middle school and high school English in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that was split between two very, very different school districts and school environments, both of which I loved. So I started out with 12 years in the Indian Hill Exempted School District with a district a lot like Wellesley, sort of outside of Cincinnati, terrific resources, really committed parents and kids, and really, really honed my craft. I had great colleagues and just terrific professional development opportunities. And then a new school had been sort of growing quietly in urban Cincinnati, in the Cincinnati Public Schools, and it was the first public Montessori high school in the nation. And I was really intrigued by the stories that I was hearing about this school. So when I had the opportunity to join their staff, I did. And what happened at Clark Montessori was that the students really taught me how to teach them. So it was very different, sort of flipped the classroom. They were very, sort of came from a strong Montessori background. They understood that they needed to have flexibility in their learning. They needed to have flexibility in the kinds of writing and reading that they were doing. And they wanted to get outside of the classroom. They wanted real world hands-on experiences. And that just sounded like a blast. So I had a really good time sort of learning how to reorient my work around students and real-world learning experiences.
And this was while you were teaching English?
Yeah, so I was teaching English, although the way it was set up, I got to do a lot of different, what we called intercessions. So I taught, with help from others, woodworking and filmmaking and all kinds of different things.
Which is great. What a nice lead into English education. I read this great article about how even humanities majors these days need to have STEM education. And they call it digital humanities. So it fits right in there with woodworking and making videos. And
there's so many different ways to express yourself. And I think as a rookie teacher, I made the mistake often of assuming that I knew the best way for all of my students to express their ideas. And what I came to learn over a couple of decades is that I often brought a great deal of experience and understanding in terms of the breadth of what was available out there for students to read, but that they, of course, had to be the ones to really fully engage with the material. So by the end, you know, I could have all of my students reading excerpts from James Joyce Ulysses, and they were the ones who were finding the ways to engage with the text. So
that's so interesting. And do you find that they were more self-motivated that way?
Oh yeah.
With that setup?
Yeah, I mean, research really shows time and time again, when you introduce choice, especially into an English classroom, that students' levels of engagement go way up. So we got to the point where we developed a curriculum that we called I Choose, You Choose. So there were some books I just could never give up, or some activities I could never give up. So I held on to those as what I chose, and then they chose fully half the curriculum by the end.
So did you find yourself having negotiations with them in class, like, well, if you read this book for me, then the next book you can pick, and then you can do this book.
It wasn't quite that. That's how it evolved. So I understood I didn't want to give it completely over to them, and they didn't want to give it completely up to me. But it was definitely an ongoing conversation. Every year I collected information from students about which books, writing assignments, and outside experiences were keepers, which were duds, which could be revised. So it just sort of grew over time.
And in your experience nationally, are more schools going that way or heading that direction, do you think?
It's interesting. I do think that in the field, in particular of secondary English, there's a very strong tradition of writing workshop, reading workshop, and allowing students some measure of choice. Again, I think that can take a little while to develop. That's why we wrote the book, frankly. It's the colleague with whom I wrote it is actually, she trains teachers. So she wanted to start very early on teaching her student teachers how they could best bring these practices to class. Is it a nationwide trend? Yeah, I mean, it's for at least 20, 25 years, this has been part of what excellent teaching looks like.
And I know that I think especially in the last 5-6 years, there's been a push nationally to remodel and reinvent STEM education across the country. And do you feel that that's taking hold as we progress?
So after I left Cincinnati, I joined Harvard's Education Leadership Program, and the third year of that program, I had the great fortune to join Cambridge and become their STEM Partnerships Coordinator. And so to answer your question, what I would say is that where I think a lot of districts are right now is understanding the terrific potential, but they're still emergent in how these things are going to come together. So finding true interdisciplinary STEM opportunities for kids is tricky because they're, you know, it sort of looks, sometimes I say it looks like S, T, E, M, where we know that science, technology, engineering, and math can coexist and do coexist. And now we're engaged in finding ways to find interdisciplinary opportunities among those classes. And so that's part of what we're trying to embed into our curriculum review process in Wellesley.
And just as from a personal standpoint, did you consider your parents to be outliers who sort of motivated you and molded you into making the career choices that you did, or was it more mentors and teachers in your experience?
Definitely a combination. My father's a scientist, my mother is an artist, so that was sort of baked in. A good healthy amount of curiosity and creating things and being innovative certainly was part of my childhood. But I have had really significant mentors. A lot of people have been very kind and generous with their time. Sometimes those people know that I'm looking up to them or kind of watching how they operate, and other times they might not. That's kind of one of the cool things about mentorships. I think one of my professors last year, Deborah Jewel Sherman, had the term sheroes, and she said, just keep the sheroes with you, you know, the women who really help guide you even when they may not realize it, and how powerful that can be.
Oh, so interesting. That's such a nice way to put it, isn't it? Nice way to put it. So what inspired you to transition out of the classroom and into being the director of curriculum and instruction?
So absolutely, it was about scale for me, where I got to the point where I could regularly have really high quality learning experiences with 100 kids a year. I saw the potential to do something at the district level. The other piece I think that a lot of people don't realize about district level work, and central office in particular, is that it really requires a team effort. Having a group of people who are really committed to making positive change for students is just huge, right? I mean, we all make a sacrifice. We'd all rather be working with kids. It's so fun. We all started as teachers, and we love our classroom experiences, but taking that sacrifice to move away from the kids a little bit so that you can do more or greater good for a greater number of students.
Systemically. And so tell us a bit about your book, Trust Me, I Can Read.
So this came out of a brunch that I had with some of my teaching colleagues where we read an article where people, the reporter was sort of questioning whether using a reading workshop approach, in other words, giving kids choice over their reading, would work in an urban environment. And there was a little bit of sort of those kids couldn't do it. And we thought, well, we do it with our students all the time, and it works really well. And I think either my colleague or I sort of made the flip comment, like, yeah, it's like they don't trust their students. And one of us just sort of, yeah, trust me, I can read. We're all literate beings. That evolved way beyond that initial conversation into really taking a deep look at what does it mean to build trust with students, with teachers, with colleagues, and with administrators. We happened to use our English classrooms as the foundation for what we talked about, but it was really a bigger exploration of rebuilding trust in public schools.
Oh, neat. Has that book, does your book get used a lot?
I think, yeah, I mean, the
workshops and...
Yeah, the sweet spot is with those emerging teachers who are really looking to enter in not just prepping kids for MCAS or prepping kids for scores. They really want to look at taking a deeper approach.
That's awesome. So tell us about STEM. So I'm going to ask you the question. Why is STEM important, in your opinion?
STEM is important, I would say, because it's the way, it actually mirrors the way the outside world works. So I spent a lot of time last year going into labs and university departments that didn't have labels like science or technology or engineering or math associated with them. These were people just frankly doing their jobs. And so it would be as foreign as having a historian or introducing to someone who is a historian that they're also going to be using language. It's a non-issue, right? Like if you're working in science, you're also working in math, you're also thinking about engineering. And in the greater Boston area, we are, as we know, one of the innovation hubs in the world that is just thriving right now. So for Wellesley students, for any student around the Boston area, they're looking at a future in which I think the statistic is 2/3 of new jobs that are going to be available over the next 30 and 40 years are going to be in STEM fields and in precision manufacturing. So I think for parents who want their kids to stick around kind of close, it's interesting to think about this is where the jobs are going to be. But it's interesting, that doesn't mean that you're strapping on goggles and doing chemistry experiments.
And you're not allowed to speak to anyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not allowed to communicate.
What I saw again and again and again last year were people who are passionate about their work, working in all kinds of ways, collaborating with each other, whether it was PR, marketing, certainly science, but also building things with their hands, doing all, human resources, STEM. The STEM profession is so much broader than just being a scientist or a mathematician working in isolation. So I really came in pretty naively. I was a 20-year English teacher, and this is the sort of work that landed in my lap, and I got increasingly sold on the power of STEM learning experiences for students.
Interesting. So as you know, we're having a town-wide STEM exposition scheduled for April 5th at the high school, where they're going to take over the entire high school and turn it into a hands-on science exhibit and speaker series placed together for all things STEM. And what are you hoping that the community at large will get out of this, putting on such a science expo?
First of all, I just want to acknowledge, I think this is such an incredible task that you've taken on. I think it's a great gift to the community to bring this kind of work in home. I think it is so rare that the everyday people get to see STEM in action. And so that would be the #1 thing. Just go out and be able to see what does it look like to model DNA? What does the inside of a Tesla look like? What is, time and time again, I think, we use these highly technological and highly science and math-oriented objects in our everyday life, but we don't get to kind of see under the hood and see what helps it come to work. So we can really fall prey to thinking that it's almost like magic. The iPhone is like magic. But really there are so many people who contribute to making those kind of magical objects become a reality. But even more than that, you know, I don't know, Wellesley seems to be, and certainly myself, has such a background in humanities, right? That's sort of the Wellesley College influence. But STEM is absolutely a part of the way that we live, and understanding the world around us is key. So I think that there will be health exhibits there, you know, things for children to do where that sort of demystify how toys work, and all of that I think is just going to be really fantastic. I do hope that when people go to the STEM Expo, they'll be inspired to bring more STEM learning, interdisciplinary learning, hands-on learning into their children's lives. Our job is to do that through the classroom. And I hope that we can work in partnership with the community to have that be part of the life of kids in and out of school.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think for parents who have primarily a liberal arts background and who are not computer and tech savvy, the whole idea of trying to inspire their children or give their children exposure to STEM fields of learning is scary. There's a feeling of being cut off from how do I build a satellite? You don't think about that on a daily basis, you know, with your day-to-day liberal arts sort of education and life that you're leading. So how would this help, do you think, parents overcome those sorts of feelings and perhaps do more to give their kids the kind of encouragement that they might need or could be exposed to and that could benefit them at home?
I think demystifying it, you know, having that first step in and sort of getting them, just like their kids will be doing, seeing how things are broken down, get in there and watch your children, observe what they're drawn to. But also, if you're curious about something that you didn't know how it worked, go in and dive in yourself. I was at Draper Laboratories last year with a 7th grader who had shadowed an engineer for the day, and she came back around with 2 takeaways. One is that her scientist partner was in charge of making guidance things that could guide very large objects through space, and they'd gotten lost in the building. So that she thought that was hilarious, that this woman who spent all of her professional time as an expert on guidance actually went down the wrong hallway. So that sort of brought it down a notch.
Well, there wasn't a GPS in
there was a GPS in the hallway. But second, and this was really cool, she turned to me and she said, do you know that it takes 400 scientists to make one of these guidance pieces? And what she saw was that her mentor was just one of those people. And I think understanding that you're not trying to solve all the problems of the world, that you are working on a team, that you can have just a slice of something that becomes very significant, I think that helps bring it down a little bit. You know, as an English major, it was sort of me and the novel and then the paper I was going to write a lot of the time. And I think there's just such an open community around STEM that feels fundamentally different, and that doesn't need to be scary.
Right, and especially in this time where in the last 25 years we've gone from essentially the typewriter to the computer to the no longer needing an answering machine that's separate from your phone, to being able to write and compose Word documents on your smartphone device and send it off, all while you're on the subway. So it's a lot of change. And that leads us into our next topic. I was going to talk about Tony Wagner, who says that the pace of technology and the pace of change is so fast that, you know, people find it daunting just to think about keeping up with the pace of change. So Tony Wagner he serves as an expert in residence at Harvard University's new Innovation Lab, and I think prior to that he headed up the Technology Entrepreneurship Center at Harvard for many years. And he's written a book called Creating Innovators. And I believe you're going to be on the panel discussion for that and talking about some of those central ideas that he brings up and raises on March 19th at the library, 7:30 p.m. So tell us a little bit about that, about, you know, why this book and why is it a good seed to have a panel discussion?
It's a terrific book. I've known Tony for a few years now, and he's just always thinking outside the box. But importantly, and I think what he does in this book is he brings that curiosity down to a level that people can really wrap their minds around. So his first book was around the global achievement gap, which was very big. But Creating Innovators is really the personal story of a number of innovators, and he just sort of goes back into their worlds and tracks what it was that helped contribute to their creativity and their innovation. There's a phrase, we want to help create makers, not users of technology, right? And so I think all the experiences that he talks about, or that he finds in these students, the commonalities around healthy doses of curiosity, having lots of time for play, and having the space to follow your passion. Those are the kinds of things that I think are really helpful for parents and for educators. They sort of give us permission to allow kids to pursue their own paths, and I'm all for that. I think that's terrific.
And what do you think of the points that are made that he talks about, that he addresses in his book, that you're looking forward to discussing with the community, in terms of, like, he talks about the 7 essential skills that people need to have in terms of being both parents and educators?
Anytime you put together a list like that, especially in a place like Wellesley, or if you're a type A person, you want to nail all of them. Right.
It's now a new target.
Exactly. And so I do want to be cautious about that and talk about a balanced approach. And
it sounds wonderful when he says it, though.
It does.
And you're like, wow, what a great thing to achieve and aspire to.
But I think, we always want to be mindful of who our children are. So taking the time to sort of observe and see where they're landing on that spectrum of 7, finding ways to talk about with your children about that. I think if we could have conversations like that around the table, I think it would be really a terrific first start for Wellesley.
So let me ask you, so 50 years down the line, after you get done with the school system here, or maybe you'll be continuing even then, 50 years from now, do you think we'll be talking about Wellesley in terms of the Finland phenomenon? Do you think we'll be able to say it's the Wellesley phenomenon, the most surprising school system in the nation?
It's interesting. I've been to Finland, and I've seen them in action, and I actually, I think that Finland's a great model for Wellesley to look at, and I do think that Wellesley has so much potential. We have an incredibly talented staff, and it's a small district, so you can take a systems approach to looking at the totality of the schools and the students and the parent community and the resources, and really start to draw some lines. I think it takes time to get there, for sure, but some of the pieces we already have in place, the community came out in droves to attend community forums around the strategic plan. They identified some really high leverage points that are good for kids. So, we've got our marching orders on that. One thing that they do in Finland that doesn't happen in very many other places around the world is that teachers really develop the curriculum in very thoughtful ways, and teachers are often working in leadership roles and then return to the classroom. I think there's so many ways that we have our teachers really, really engaged in the important work of learning. This just is not the kind of a district where scripted curricula can be, jammed down teachers' throats, right? And we're small enough that we can handle that scale. We can wrap our minds around, all right, we've got 500 educators, we have 5,000 kids, how can we get everybody working in concert? So I think that kind of coherence is what will really help put Wellesley even more on the map than it already is.
And I like the current emphasis in Wellesley, which is to create STEM education, awareness, and opportunities, and not emphasize that we're not trying to emphasize that we're not trying to bring in a spirit of competition, but it's really about education and opportunities. So that's great. That's a really good good message. Okay, so here's my question to you. It's from a woman's standpoint. So I read a recent article in the HuffPost that talked about women in other countries who are being exposed to STEM as well, as STEM education. And it's interesting because here in the U.S. we're trying to bridge sort of a STEM gap that we feel exists. But in other countries, especially from a woman's perspective, they're still dealing with basic literacy issues. So in terms of that whole global context, nationally and globally, where do you think women are today? So 50 years after the women's movement started. Yeah,
I mean, there's no doubt that we are far ahead of many of our female peers in other parts of the world. It's, It's hard to say. I mean, I was born in Ann Arbor in 1968, and the whole women's movement was alive and well in my household. And I really understand that I personally am standing on the shoulders of many, many women who came before me. You know, I've chosen a career in a pretty gendered environment, right, in education, but moving into a more administrative role, I think that helps break through it a little bit. With STEM, I don't know exactly what led to this, but most of the people that I worked with last year in Cambridge, and of course here in Wellesley, the STEM Expo movement has really been largely driven by women. There's such a passion among women around STEM, and I feel like that is the next frontier. You know, taking over some of these traditionally male enclaves and just bringing the creativity and the collaboration that women bring to the table is so terrific. Saying that, I would not want to lose track that this is something that we do together, right? That this is a field that can be open to all. But women are just making enormous gains in these fields, but we're not there yet. Women are still very underrepresented in fields like computer science and in engineering, and so, and in geology, I would imagine.
Yes.
And so
engineering,
all that. So we still have ways to go. Our girls do really well in Wellesley and many of those fronts. And so, for example, as we introduce more and more computer science, we'll be looking at highly engaging programs and courses that can bring in underrepresented groups like women and minorities.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and hope to see you on March 19th for the panel discussion.
Great.
At the library. And stay tuned. Coming up next, we'll be airing Tony Wagner's TED Talk on creating innovators and the making of young people who will change the world.
So how many of you are educators, past, present, or future? Raise your hands. Good grief. I'm in the right place. I'm a recovering high school English teacher. True story. How many of you mentor young kids? Raise your hands. I'm definitely in the right place. For 25 years, we've heard about failing schools and the need to reform our schools. Anybody want to go reform school? Raise your hands. Einstein once said, the formulation of the problem is often more important than the solution. I would like to respectfully suggest that our schools are not failing. They certainly don't need reforming. The system is obsolete and needs reinventing, not reforming. What's changed? It's simply this. Knowledge today is a commodity. It's free. It's like air. It's like water. How many of you have been on the Khan Academy website? Raise your hands. Yeah, most of you. Right. You know the quality of the education people can receive on that if they're willing to take the initiative. How many of you had to memorize the periodic table in high school? Raise your hands. Ah, everybody. Good. So how many were there again? No, wait, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Whatever number you came up with is wrong because 2 more were added last week. And planets, are we up 1 or down 1? I don't know, I haven't checked my news feed today. And let's see, let's have a contest. Why don't you recite the 50 state capitals from memory while I Google them? Let's see who's quicker. Knowledge is a commodity. The world no longer cares whether or not you're smarter than a 5th grader or how well you do a Trivial Pursuit. What the world cares about is not what you know, but what you can do with what you know. And that is a completely different education problem. Then the question becomes, do you have the skill and do you have the will to use the knowledge you have acquired? Okay, so I got to tell you kind of an intellectual journey I've been on. 2005, I read The World is Flat by Friedman. How many have read that book? Scared the heck out of me because, as you know, he describes a world where increasingly any job that can be routine is rapidly being offshored or automated. White collar, blue collar, doesn't matter. Talked to him recently, interviewed him for the new book. He said, I got one thing wrong in that book. I said, what was that? He said, the pace of change. It's happening so much faster. So I worried about what kinds of skills will our young people need to get and keep a good job in this new global knowledge economy. And in fact, are they the same skills they'll need for citizenship and for continuous learning? Started interviewing a wide range of innovators, literally from Apple to Unilever, executives, U.S. Army, community leaders, college teachers, asking all of them, what are the skills that matter most today? What's important? Came to understand there's a set of core competencies every young person must be well on the way to mastering before he or she finishes high school. Not just to get a good job, but to be a continuous learner and an active and informed citizen in the 21st century. Very briefly, they are: number one, critical thinking and problem solving. What do they mean by critical thinking? The ability to ask the right questions, ask really good questions. Number two, collaboration across networks and leading by influence. Number three, agility and adaptability. Number four, initiative and entrepreneurialism. Number five, effective oral and written communication. Number six, accessing and analyzing information. And lastly, number seven, curiosity and imagination. So a couple things happened when that book came out 3.5 years ago. This is the global achievement gap that Homa just referred to. First of all, I got a kind of affirmation from literally around the world that simply stunned me. Taiwan to Singapore to Helsinki to Madrid and kind of all places in between. Thailand, Bahrain, Birmingham, England. From Wall Street to West Point, people said to me, yep, these are exactly the right skills. I felt pretty good, not bad. Then the other thing happened. The economy collapsed. And I saw kids coming home from college, seemingly having acquired some, maybe most of these skills, coming home from college to no job. They had the skills, but something was missing. Right now today, half of all recent college graduates are either unemployed or underemployed. A third are living at home. Maybe some of you in this audience. What did I miss? What was wrong? Well, as I try to understand the essence of this economic crash, I came to understand it's a lot more than the credit default swaps we read about, a lot more than just a hyperinflated real estate market and so on. Here's what I learned. Maybe you all know this. I didn't. More than 70% of our economy is based on consumer spending. What's everybody's biggest fear? That consumers will stop spending. That's why we lose jobs. Number two, that consumer spending has been increasingly fueled by people going into debt, pulling money out of their houses as fast as they could, putting money on credit cards as fast as they could. 2007, the savings rate was minus 2%, leading me to conclude that maybe what we have done is create an economy based on people spending money they do not have to buy things they may not need, threatening the planet in the process. I think it's increasingly clear that kind of economy is not sustainable. As Jamie Cloud said, it is not sustainable environmentally. It is not even sustainable economically. Right now, today, the savings rate's about 4%. Consumers are saving more than they are spending. I don't think it's sustainable spiritually either. We need something different. So as I began to try to understand what's the alternative, what's going to be our niche in the global economy, one word appeared over and over and over again: innovation. The idea of not just the major innovations in STEM, but becoming a country that produces more better ideas to solve more different kinds of problems, ideas that generate jobs, ideas that other people want and need as solutions to real problems, every kind of problem. So, America's always been known as a highly innovative country, but is that because of or in spite of our education system? Important question. We have infrastructure, spend on R&D, copyright protection laws, good immigration policy until recently. What about education? All right, Trivia Pursuit question of the day, so fast you're not going to be able to Google the answer. What do Bill Gates, Edwin Land, the inventor of the Polaroid instant camera, Martin Zuckerberg of Facebook fame, and Bonnie Raitt, the folk singer, all four have in common? Sorry, they were not dropouts. They were Harvard College dropouts. That's different. Thank you very much. Steve Jobs is a dropout. Michael Dell is a dropout. These guys were Harvard dropouts. So I decided to take a different tack, trying to understand, what must we do differently to develop the capacities of many more of our young people to be innovators? What must we do as parents, as teachers, as mentors, and as employers? Started interviewing a wide range of innovators in their 20s, extraordinary young people. Some from privilege, some from poverty. Wide range, all over the country. Some in STEM fields, some in arts, some were social innovators and entrepreneurs. Then I interviewed each one of their parents. trying to understand if there were patterns of parenting that I might observe. Then I asked each one of them, is there a teacher or a mentor who's made a significant difference in your life? 1/3 of them, 1/3, could not name a single teacher. Of the 2/3 who could, they could name at least one teacher. The third that couldn't name a teacher could always name a mentor, by the way. Very important. We underestimate the importance of mentoring. So I went and interviewed each one of those teachers and mentors. And I made what was for me a shocking discovery. In every single case, the teachers whom I interviewed, and I interviewed teachers from elementary school to graduate school, the full spectrum. In every case, every one of those teachers was an outlier in his or her school setting. In fact, I went to 5 colleges, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, Tulane. All 5 of those college teachers, having produced brilliant innovators, continue to do so. None of them had tenure, nor were they ever going to get tenure. What's the problem here? Well, what I came to learn is that the culture of schooling, as we have grown up with it, is radically at odds with the culture of learning that produces innovators in 5 essential respects. Number 1, we celebrate and reward individual achievement. And sure, there's an important place for that, but as you well know, innovation is a team sport. And all of these teachers built real, accountable teamwork and collaboration into all of their assignments. Number 2, we're all about specialization in American education. High school universe is divided and conquered by something we call Carnegie units, which are 115 years old. Chemistry this, biology that, and so on. The world of innovation is interdisciplinary and problem-based learning. I interviewed Judy Gilbert at Google. She said to me, if there's one thing educators must understand, is that problems can no longer be solved nor even understood within the bright lines of academic disciplines. Number 3, the culture of schooling is all about risk aversion and penalizing failure. Student's job is to figure out what the teacher needs. Give the teacher whatever the teacher wants. Teacher's job is to avoid trouble. You know, that we're not encouraged to take risks as educators, right? The world of innovation, as you well know, is all about taking risks, making mistakes, and learning from them. I went to IDEO, most innovative design company in the world. They said to me, our motto is fail early and fail often. Whew. That's because there is no innovation without trial and error. I went to the D School, started by David Kelly from IDEO, an amazing interdisciplinary program at Stanford. They were talking around in a table together and saying, you know, we're actually thinking F is the new A. Try selling that report card back at your schools. I talked to a student at Olin College. Olin is, by the way, probably the best college in the country right now today. Every course, interdisciplinary, team-based, project-based, extraordinary place. Talked to a student at Olin. He said, you know, we don't even really talk about failure much here. We talk about iteration. Heck, I don't think I knew what that word meant 5 years ago, but it's become something so important as a concept to me in learning. There are no mistakes, there are iterations. Although I have to ask you, how many of you learn more from your mistakes than your successes? Raise your hands. Yeah, me too. God, that hurts sometimes. That's painful. But the point is, we protect children in school. We protect children at home. The helicopter parents hover. They don't want their children to make mistakes lest their perfect record become blemished in some way. But that's the only source of real self-confidence, that you learn that you can recover from a mistake. And you don't want to learn that when you're 35 because it hurts a lot more then. The 4th one, you know, the culture of learning is so much about passive consumption. In fact, I think that's where we all learn to be good little consumers in school, because we sit and get all day long. The classrooms of innovators are all about creating real products for real audiences. Lastly, and most important, we rely on extrinsic incentives for learning. Carrots and sticks, money for good grades. The world of innovation, these young innovators, every one of them whom I interviewed, was far more intrinsically motivated. They wanted to make a difference in the world. And so then when I look back at what these parents had done and what these teachers had done to encourage this intrinsic motivation, I found another pattern. Play to passion to purpose. Parents and teachers alike encouraging more exploratory play, fewer toys, toys without batteries, less screen time, more time that was unstructured. Get out and play. Parents who encouraged students to find and pursue a passion, who knew that was more important than mere academic achievement. Teachers who encouraged students, made time in every class for students to do projects, to do research, to do experimentation, to find and pursue an intellectual or artistic passion. And in every case, as these kids have developed passions, they morphed, they changed, they evolved into a deeper sense of purpose. Because parents and teachers alike said one thing: give back, make a difference. And all of them have that value, want in some way to make a difference. So what does this mean for our work? Well, we could have a long conversation about how the system needs reinventing. I've written some things about that. But I come back to what each one of us can do. And I come back to the idea that, first of all, we have to be innovators in our teaching and in our mentoring. We have to model the values, the behaviors of innovation. We have to, in our teaching, be willing to take risks, be willing to learn from mistakes, work more collaboratively with our colleagues. But I think above all, maybe what's most important for me is that I, as a teacher and as a mentor, now think much, much more about where and how am I encouraging the play, the passion, and the purpose in everything that I do with young people. Thank you very much.